record. Okay. Okay, we're recording. Very good. Okay, so we're going to talk about the buyer's workshop today and setting expectations, navigating all the contract and addenda. And this isn't so more along the lines of, track rules and regulations and filling in the blank. I'm taking my approach to this as real life, right? You're out in the street, real life. How you going to talk to people about this contract and negotiations? How you're going to work with the other side of the realtor on the deal? And so there's a lot that goes on. And the better you get at understanding the contract, the better you get in negotiating with the co-op, right? And the better you get with explaining it to your client. So ultimately, you get to closing and you have a really, really smooth transaction and you provide great customer service, right? Great customer service creates raving fans, creates repeat business. So the process with working a buyer is pretty detailed, right? You got to prospect, you got to meet them, you got to qualify them and discover what their needs and wants are. You got to tour homes with them. There's a selection process once you start touring. Our contracts and addenda, obviously, negotiation and close, the follow-up, continuing of that relationship, and then asking for referrals. So it's a really long process working with buyer, and every step of this process requires you to build sales skills. And so let's go through each one of those processes today, and hopefully you can start honing in on your skills and becoming really great at each one of them. So, personality profiling. Personality profiling is one of those sales skills. If you have an opportunity to take a personality class, kind of helps you understand yourself and understand the consumer that you're working with. To know yourself is to see how others see you. To know your buyers is to listen and watch them. You want to listen 80% of the time, let them talk 80% of the time. You want to learn to hone in your skill on being a listener, a really good listener, being really in tune to really what they're saying, what they're wanting, and what they're needing. It can be a nod, a handshake, an attitude, or body language that gives you clues for good communication. And vice versa. You doing one of those wrong actually kind of gives bad vibes to the other person, right? So when you're out there prospecting and you're doing an open house, and you're doing a lot of open houses, you get a lot of people through, but you can't convert anybody. That's the time to look in the mirror. What am I doing? What am I saying? What's my body language? What's my appearance like? Am I turning people off? If you're getting a lot of people and a lot of traffic and you're in front of a lot of people and you can't convert them, there's something wrong. Because people right away, they make a judgment on a human being within the first few minutes, first few seconds. And it's not that hard. It's just not that hard. People just want to trust and like you. A nice smile, just looking the part and looking well-dressed and well-groomed, right? Looking mature, looking like you're knowledgeable. Those will win people instantaneously. It really shouldn't be that hard. But if it is that hard, that's a cue that there's something in your process just not working and you need to fix that skill. The more questions we ask, the more we allow the other party to communicate and express their feelings and thoughts. You got to learn the sales skill of asking a lot of questions. You want to listen carefully to what they're saying and not pay attention to displays of not paying attention displays a lack of interest in the other party. We want to develop, we need to let go of our ego. We need to get out of our box and put your situations that make you uncomfortable out of the way. A lot of us come with a lot of preconceived notions. A lot of us come with a lot of history, a lot of baggage, a lot of personal life. When you're in sales, those have to go out the window, right? When you're in sales and you're in front of a consumer, I always say it's showtime. So you're having a terrible day, you're having a terrible life. Things are just not going your way. You get a black cloud. Hey, I know I've had a lot of black clouds in my life. Just wander right in and wander right out. When I'm in sales, and for me to keep my business going and checks coming in and commissions and sales, I've had to put a smile on my face and pretend that the world is great, right? I had to put a smile on, have my confidence on, and make sure I can land a client that week, that day, that month. We have a lot of different personality styles. I don't have time. I'm going to kind of maybe extend this class a little bit to go over personality styles. I think it's a lot of fun. But I have 4 personality styles that I always kind of just kept close to me as a tool in my tool belt, and understanding those helped me really understand and expand my business. There's the driver, the amiable, the expressive, and the analytical. All I'm going to say about those really quickly. The driver is somebody who's really driven, quick, knows what they want, wants quick answers, wants a bottom line. They're a bottom line type person. The amiable is the one that just wants to please everybody. They're the team player, you know, they want everybody to like them. They're going to make sure everybody's okay. They're the nurturer. The expressive. This one I say, this is the gal with the flaming red hair, with the scarves, the jewelry, the bright colored clothes, the gentleman with the bright colored clothes, shows up in the fancy car, right? They're the hot mess. They're just all over the place. They're the networker. They're the social person, right? And so I just picture her. She's the flaming, you know, Lucille Ball type person, you know, very smart, not very smart. Lucille Ball was a very smart woman, but that's the expressive personality, larger than life. You're going to talk and deal with them very differently. And there's the analytical. That's your engineer. He wants the Excel spreadsheet. He will not make a decision until he understands all the numbers thoroughly. They'll have to pick through it themselves. I do have extra copies here if somebody needs it. Looks like they're not in order, but they're not in order. But I'm going to give you this, okay, and pick out your set from here. And then if you could bring that back to me, I'm so sorry. So the driver, when I'm on a listing presentation or buyer presentation to him, I'm going to keep my materials short and sweet and to the point. When I'm with the amiable, I'm going to make sure they have everything. They're going to have an Excel spreadsheet, pretty materials to look at, as much information as I can, and I'm going to be a sharer of all. The expressive, all I need for that is pretty shiny materials, all my marketing materials. My marketing presentation has to look beautiful. She's going to want to make sure her listing looks better than anybody else's. She wants the pretty package in a bow, in a Tiffany box. Oh, by the way, let's tell everybody about it. And then the analytical, I'm going to make sure I have my numbers to a T. I'm going to make sure I have written out all the analytics for them with my own handprint. So I have computer, and then I have my own handprint of you know, price per square foot and notes. This way he could see I did the analysis as well. And I'm going to go over every detail with him. So that's helpful, right? If you know that and you know who you are, then you can play to your strengths and weaknesses. The buyer interview. You want to pinpoint what they're needing and wanting and have a consultation. The buyer interview is the most important part of the process with working with a buyer, because you want to make sure you get a really good sense of who they are, why they're doing what they're doing, that they're ready, willing, and able to do this, and that you can confidently find what it is they need. And in the right time frame, right? So some of the questions I have listed here are great little questions just to kind of memorize and regurgitate every time you see somebody or you do an interview. What do you like about your current home? I love asking that question because this tells me how they live. What's their lifestyle like now? Describe what you want in your new home. What do you need in your new home? What features must you have in your new home? I asked them, paint me a picture of your perfect home. What does that look like? What does the lifestyle, look like to you? And then I start getting into the sacrifice part of it. What features could you do without if you found the perfect home and location? What kind of lifestyle do you want in your new neighborhood? Because people aren't just looking about the home, they're looking about the neighborhood, the schools, the community, the soccer fields close by, the parks close by. If if you're working with a family that's relocating in for Dubai, they don't drive a lot, right? They walk a lot. And so if they're coming here, they're coming without a driver, the mom, the wife, the mother of the family doesn't know how to drive. Walking is going to be really important. Parks that are close by, stores that are close by, those kinds of things. Then you get into the timing. What is your ideal timing for this move? Do you need to be moved in a certain time? Do you have to be registered in schools by a certain time? How many people will be occupying your new home? You may be meet one person and you think they're a young couple and it's just those two. And guess what? Halfway through the process, you find out there's a whole extended family being moved in with them. And showing them what their options are, maybe a 1.5 story is good for them, or, a 2-bedroom down is good for them. Knowing how many people are going to occupy the home and their lifestyle is going to help you educate them into what type of product they need to buy, because they might not know themselves. But if you know how many people are going to be in the home and what their lifestyle is going to be, then you can help sell them on something else. Maybe they thought all they could have is a 1 story. Well, no, you can have a 1.5 story. Along those lines. How far of a drive from your home to work is acceptable? Do you have friends and family in the neighborhood or in the area? Then you get into the money part of the consultation. Are they renting? Do they own? Are they aware of the earnest money requirements? Are they aware of out-of-pocket expenses like inspections? Spend 5 or 10 minutes in your consultation talking about money. The finances of the buyer are a critical piece of the buying process, right? Getting them pre-qualified is necessary and a key step that should be the first step in the process of buying a home. So when you're having this buyer consultation, you're going to tell them how important your finances are and that this is going to be your first step in the journey. And you're going to tell them, why the finances are important, because there's key things that you need to know as their realtor to be able to provide them the right contract with the right addenda and the right disclosures. And to negotiate based on the financing that they have. Negotiations are very multi-layered. There's many, many terms of a contract that you have to negotiate through. Price is just one. The financing really mandates the rest of the contract. The type of loan that they have, the down payment requirement of that loan, the rate, the amount of the loan, who is borrowing. The borrowers are the ones who go on the contract. How long is the rate locked for? Is the rate not locked? Is the rate floating? And of course, as you're going through your consultation, if they don't have a lender, you're going to recommend one. We have wonderful in-house lenders. As a new agent that you should get to know very well. Go to lunch with these people, meet them, sit down, talk about finances, have one of the loan officers explain to you finances. If you don't understand closing costs, sit down, take one of these officers to lunch and have them do a 101 with you so you understand what down payment different loans are. It's your job to kind of have a general knowledge of that stuff so you can help the consumer with it, right? So if you had your consultation, you've asked them about their current lifestyle and situation, you asked them about what their wishes and needs are, we've talked about finance, now you're ready to start scheduling the day and showing property. Scheduling and showing property. The homes that you select for them should be homes that you've already previewed and you've kind of narrowed them down and weeded out junk. You want to show them the hot stuff that you know that they could buy. So there's two sides to that coin of what I just said. In the very beginning stages, if you don't know somebody and you haven't taken them out, what happens 90% of the time is you put their information in the system, you set it up on an automatic search, and you let the system send them a whole bunch of stuff. And some agents don't even know what's being sent out there. They just, here's a list, let me know when you like something, and let's schedule an appointment. Don't you think they're getting that list from every other agent in town? Don't you think they're looking on Zillow and Realtor.com and doing their own search? So I asked my buyer, how are you doing your search? Do you want me to work with you on the search? You want to work together on the search? Do you want me to do it exclusively? How do you want to do that? And the reason I asked that question is because I know they're probably looking. I want to know where they're looking. So she goes, oh, if they tell me no, I'll look and you look, and then, we'll share that information. We'll go out when I see something that I like. Great. Where are you looking? Oh, I'm looking on Zillow, Realtor.com. Great. Can I suggest HAR.com? Can I suggest my app? Can I suggest you look on our Keller Williams site? Whatever it is you're going to use for your business, you want to know where they're looking and how they're looking. And then I have a conversation with them. I said, well, when I do my search, I'm going to look for those. I'm going to preview. I'm going to weed out what I think is not good. And when I send you a list, they're going to be the top finds that I find in the market area. When can you go and look at those? Are evenings better, mornings better, weekends? You want to control the situation a little bit more. And you want to go out with them in person, because going out with the human being live in person, seeing their reaction to things, you get a better understanding of really what their likes and dislikes are, right? It's one thing to see things in paper in black and white. It's a very different experience walking through a home. And I tell that to my client. I said, we're going to be looking at a lot of stuff on paper, but I really want to take you out in person on a live tour, because it's very different when I show you and take you on a tour of a home. We can see a lot more, feel a lot more, sense a lot more when we're seeing the home live and in person. I want the appointment. I want them in my car, or I want to meet them at the house. I want to shorten the time frame where I keep them on a computer searching and I'm on a computer searching. Does that make sense? I want to shorten that gap up. I want to put it aside. I want to get them out and looking at property as quickly as possible. The best way to do that is you search, you weed out the stuff that's not going to work, and you preview. If I find there's 10 homes, I said, man, these would be really good for them. I'm going to hop in my car that afternoon because I've got nothing else to do. These are my only clients. I'm going to preview every one of those, because I can weed out if something's got a power plant behind it or a sewer plant behind it, or it has something that she absolutely told me in my consultation she can't stand or doesn't want. I'm not going to take her to show her that. I'm not going to send it to her. If I send it to her or take her to show her that, right away it's, she didn't hear what I said. He ain't getting me. I told him I didn't want this, and then look, they send it to me anyway. It eliminates that. So I'll go out and preview those 10. I narrow it down to 5. I'm on the phone with her. Oh my gosh, I had a fabulous day today. Remember those homes I said I sent to you? I previewed those today and I got the top 5. And I really think these would be great candidates for you, or great options for you. Are you free tonight? Are you free this weekend? So it's a very different conversation, right? You get them excited. You get them, okay, these are great finds. When you set up the tour, you want to make sure that you allow ample time for viewing the neighborhood, getting a feel for the property, time for them to make notes. You want to route the tour so that's efficient in time and drivability. You don't want to be zigzagging with people in the car. This day and age, people are following you. Back, when I was in the business early on, that was unheard of. I mean, we all just popped in one car and, the realtor was definitely the Tijuana taxi and drove all over the place. When I started in Vegas, so you can imagine. My first question was, are you staying in a hotel or do you live here? Because if they were staying in a hotel, I knew I was just going to be a tour guide, for the Las Vegas Henderson area. And I, doing that a few times, I'm not going to be a Las Vegas tour guide. But so you want to make sure that you get, you schedule these things properly, route them in a map so that they're easy to get to and they're timely. I kind of gave you a little tip in here, 10 minutes preview and 5-minute drive time for a typical master plan community tour, for Cinco Ranch, 10 minutes at home, 5 minutes to drive, 15 minutes in between is a really great ballpark for you to schedule. Always cancel the showing service with the listing agent. Always notify or reschedule the showing service or the listing agent if your tour is running behind your scheduled time. So there's professional etiquette in showing property. You want to make sure that you are very professional. You want to make sure you cancel, reschedule, do whatever it is you need to do for that seller and listing agent, even if they're with a different brokerage. Because you want the same return to you when you're a listing agent. It's not appropriate to show up at a house without an appointment. It's not appropriate to show up late. And it's not appropriate to just do a no-show. And even if your client just told you at the last minute, it's okay, say, great, you don't want to see this house, just give me 1 minute, I need to cancel the appointment. And that shows them seeing you being very professional as well, right? Taking notes, the summary and the throwaway. So every time you show them a house, you want to make sure you're getting great feedback from them. So if you narrowed it down, you're taking them to see your top 5 or the top 5 you think that works for them this week. You could provide them a handout of the tour so they can write notes on it. And before you leave each home, you want to do a summary of that showing. Suggest to them to take notes and suggest to them to rate them a 1 to 3 or whatever rating system you come up. I came up with a system 1 to 3. 3 is, it's not a consideration. 2 is, they would consider it, but it requires some kind of sacrifice. It's not quite it, something's off, I consider it, but it's just something's not right. And then 1 is, we consider making an offer on this one. This way, as we're going through the tour, they'll naturally come to their top, their middle, and the last bottom stuff that they don't want. Taking notes helps them rethink their wants and needs and focus on what is important. Question their rating and their notes. It helps to eliminate and narrow the search and recap the day, reevaluate the process at the end of the day. So as we go through a house, before I walk out, I say, Catherine, what'd you think? Be honest. I have to give the seller feedback and the listing agent, but more importantly, I want to kind of know, did it hit some high points, check boxes for you? And if she looks at me, it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Then this is going to be 3, not a consideration. And if I have my sheet in front of me and I literally will take it there. Okay, we're done with that one. It's the act of we're narrowing it down. If she says to me, yeah, I like this, I like some things, but I don't like, what do you like best? I like the kitchen. What do you like about the kitchen? It's white. Okay, so you like the white cabinets. What don't you like? It's not open enough. So you start to get a feel for what it is they really, really want. The biggest thing is, I don't like the backyard. Well, why don't you like the backyard? It's too small. It's too small. What did you want to do with that backyard? Well, I want a trampoline. Are you going to put a pool? I'm not going to put a pool in, but I want a trampoline. I got dogs. Oh, so you were looking for green space. You need space for a dog run or the dog to do pee-pees, right? So it's kind of asking those questions that you get to say, okay, this is what they're really looking for, not looking for. I had a client one time, it was a husband and wife, and I showed them a ton of homes. They wanted 2 stories and beautiful, beautiful homes. They were from Norway. So I know in Norwegians, they really like clean, simple, modern, right? They're very minimalistic. And so I showed some great homes. And then, you know, the second or third one, you know, he's just, I started to notice him, you know, we walked through one and I kept seeing him duck and duck. And then I said to him, I said, you know, what is, you're not liking these homes? And I said, I kind of feel like, you know, do we need to look at something with taller ceilings and high? He's like, yeah, he's like, I just feel like these are so small and cramped. And when I started taking him to those homes with a 2-story entryway, 2-story family room, you know, the 15-foot ceilings, world of difference. He couldn't figure it out. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he's such a tall guy. Looking at stuff with 8-foot ceilings, you know, square entranceways rather than arched made a big difference. So seeing that, I picked up on the body language, you know, and he didn't even know what it was, but those are the things that, okay, now you can tweak it. Okay, then this is a builder, you know, Trendmaker is going to be the builder for you. Pulte is not, you know, David Weekley is not the builder for these people, but a builder that builds those open, wide, tall door floor plans is what's going to be for this guy, right? So recapping the day, reevaluating the process is going to narrow you down to what it is that they really need and want. Hopefully narrow you down on the shopping list. Okay, all showings must be scheduled, even ones that are vacant. So yeah, even if you come across that's vacant, a home that's vacant, just make sure that you still schedule an appointment. Showing instructions. Make sure every home comes with showing instructions. When you're showing property, you want to make sure you have those in your notes. You do not give them to the consumer in those notes. In your notes, you're going to keep a record of codes to get in, gate codes, combination codes. Those are really all important. Some listing agents use Supra lock boxes, others use combo lock boxes. Some put them on the front door, some put them on the gate, some put them on the back door. All those instructions will be given to you by the showing service. It's your job to manage that and get that information. Alarm settings is very key. Leaving a business card or not leaving a business card, locking doors, shutting lights, thermostats, pools, waterfalls, pet requirements, COVID requirements, returning keys to the lockbox. All of those are your professional responsibility and for you to manage those in a very professional way. So pay attention. The biggest mistakes we make is we get really busy. We're talking to our client. I've done it quite a few times. I walk away with the key. I drive off. I've got the key, or I leave the key in the house. I've locked my purse in the house. I've locked, you know, I've done it all. And it's embarrassing and it holds up the tour and it's, you know, you hate to make, I hate making that call to the listing agent. Hey, sorry, I drove off with the key, or hey, I locked the key in the house. It's a pain in the neck. So just pay attention, take your time, pace yourself, don't be nervous, and just make sure you kind of handle those and manage those in the right way. Never re-enter a property without an appointment. So you show the property, your clients like it at 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, you're done with your tour and they say, oh, you know what? I really liked house number 1. Can we go back? Sure, we can go back. I need to make another appointment. You can't just go back to that house, even if it's vacant. You need to have an appointment. And then I have in here, when in doubt, turn off lights. In a normal market, a house may get a showing once or twice during the day. So there is proper etiquette to go there early, turn the lights on and turn them off so the homeowner is not spending so much money on the bill. The trend today, because our market is so hot and literally a house probably has a showing every 15 minutes, is to keep them on. And so like in my case, I had a listing that went live on Thursday. The homeowners literally went to a hotel for the weekend, came at 8 o'clock in the morning, turned the lights on, pool on, waterfall on, surround sound, TV, theater, everything is on, comes back at 5 o'clock and shuts everything off. So my instructions to all showing agents was, do not touch anything. So it's really important that you listen to what their instructions are and abide by those. Quick point on safety. Always let someone know where you are and who you're going with, who you're meeting. In this day and age, unfortunately, our business can be a little dangerous. We've had agents, I've known quite a few in my career, and me personally, that been robbed, attacked, sent into the hospital. Thank goodness I don't know anybody personally killed, but we know of realtors who have been killed in this line of duty. So it's just really important that you be smart, you know who you're meeting. I wouldn't meet anybody late at night and those kinds of things. Trust your gut. If you're not sure, just take somebody with you. Common sense. So let's start with, we've shown them property, right? We've done our pre-qualification questions. I gave you some tidbits, things to ask. So we know what we're doing. We show them the property. We did that all properly, and now we found the right one. So what do we do when we're ready to make an offer? So there's some things you critically need to know before you can even write the contract. And hopefully you did that in your consultation. So whoever is borrowing is the names that are going to go on the contract. The names should be as they appear on their driver's license. Why? Because when they get to the title company and go to closing, the person that sits in front of them, the human being, has to match who's on the driver's license. And that has to match all of their paperwork, lender paperwork and contract. So just get it right from the beginning. Whatever their names are on the driver's license is who should be on the contract. You want to make sure you discuss with them the time frame required to get approved and close the loan. Make sure you have a quick conversation with the lender. If need be, if they don't understand that, say, hey, we're about to write an offer for these people. Is there anything I need to know before I write the offer? And then how would they like to review the contract? In person, a phone consultation, Zoom? Do they want a wet sign? Wet sign means they sign in front of you, or digital sign. And how will they pay the earnest money and option fee? So in today's world, when we write a contract, we create it in DocuSign, and we have the luxury of not having to print, right? We're almost a paperless industry. And so we can send them to DocuSign to sign. However, what gets lost and turns into a very poor business practice is the ability to actually run through the contract with the consumer. And I can almost guarantee you, if you don't do that, you're going to have a really bumpy transaction or a really horrible transaction.
When it will, in this market, when you want to get a offering quickly, what does quickly really mean? Like if you're taking in the process of having to go over, what you're going to send and send it electronically to the buyers to sign over, then that process of sending. So quickly, what does that mean in terms of time?
What I would do, a practice I would have changed up if I was working with buyer in today's market, is when I have my buyer's consultation, right then and there, I would have all my disclosures and addenda with me, and I'd have a copy of a blank 1 to 4, and I would review the contract with them up front. And I would say, look, we're in a very heated market. When we find a home, we're going to have to act very quickly in writing an offer. So I'd like to take 45 minutes out this morning to kind of go over all of these things now, and let's review them now, because I'm going to send them to you. And we might just want to only review it for 20 minutes at that time. We'll just look at the terms that pertain to this house that we're going to make an offer in. But let's spend the time now in going over the details of the contract. And this way, because pretty much if you know the terms and their financing, it's not going to change. Only the address is going to change. So if you can do that legwork up front and have that, it's going to make that process when you find a home, okay, I'm going to fill in the blanks. Let's review the short terms, those paragraphs you only have to go through, and going to go through a contract. That's going to make that so much easier, is it not? So I rather do the legwork up front, spend the 45 minutes to hour my consultation and go over all of that. And then that allows me to quickly turn around and offer, write one up. You know, if I would set them up in my command, in my DocuSign. This way it's plug and play. And I could probably get one done in 15, 20 minutes. If not, those of you who are new have tried to write a contract, could take you a couple hours. It could take you a couple hours.
Yeah.
Discuss and review comparable market analysis. Discuss and review the comps, the features and benefits of the home. Discuss the home inspections and the re-inspection process. Review thoroughly all the expectations and the full buying process with them. Now is the time. If you didn't before, now is definitely the time. So you reviewed all the finances and the terms with the buyer and the lender. You have all the information that you need to write a contract. Now you introduce yourself to the listing agent and you establish a rapport. You want to discuss the move out and move in process. You want to set expectations with that other agent. You've asked what the needs and wants are of the seller. Are there any special accommodations? Are they going to be present to close? I like to ask questions of the listing agent. I use terms like, hey, you know, Catherine, you know, I'm going to be presenting an offer on your listing. Your listing shows great. It's a great house. I really want to make sure that, you know, we work as a team and that you and I can get this to the finish line. Is there anything that your seller is looking for? Any special accommodations? Can they close in 30 days? And she's going to tell me, yeah, they can close in 30 days. And no, they're going to need a lease back. Great, they need a lease back. Tell me about that. Are they buying something else? Is it school related? And so I kind of ask a few questions because I'm going to use that to leverage my offer. Accurate information. Accurate information. What I wanted to hone in on this is you want to make sure you have the most accurate information possible while you're writing this contract. It's not okay to guess. It's not okay to make assumptions. It's not okay to feel, well, if I screw it up now, we can do an amendment later and fix it later. Fixing it later probably means it's going to cost somebody money. So before you write a contract, you want to make sure you have the most accurate information as possible. It's your job and duty to do that. Opinion of others. Be very careful on the opinion you seek from others, especially if you're new in the business. A lot of top agents, they have the luxury that they can do shortcuts. They have the luxury of making decisions because they can predict what's going to happen down the road. When you're a new agent, you really don't understand all the pitfalls and things that can happen down the road. So you really need to do things by the book. And if you don't know, you need to ask me, Karen Norwood. You know, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to go to Lloyd. And so that's what we're here for. And so just make sure that you get the right information from the right people. So you heard it through the grapevine. I've just been lucky so far in that grapevine, right? So just be really careful who you get advice from. In the process, what comes first is disclosures. The disclosures come first. The information about brokerage services, your buyer rep agreement, the general info and notice to buyer. For your protection, get a home inspection, information about flood hazard, information about property insurance, your MUD, seller's real property disclosure, and a buyer's net sheet. These are all the primary disclosures that come first. that are very important and critical. And the signing and giving of those before execution is mandated in the contract. So here's your little list of things that you're going to have in your little toolbox in your buyer presentation. And part of when you write an offer, these have to be those critical things that you're going to have to give to your client. And you want to know and understand these documents very, very intimately. The contract and addenda. Addenda means attached, right? Contract and things that are attached to it. They're Twinkies. They're like Siamese twins. Once they're marked as addenda, they can't be separated. The 1 to 4 family, the third-party financing, addendum for property subject to mandatory membership in a property owners association, non-realty items, the addendum concerning right to terminate due to lender's appraisal, an addendum for sale of other property. These 6 documents are what you're going to see a lot in today's market. Depending on the market, more other addenda are more popular than others, but in today's market, today, 2021, you're going to see these addenda almost part of every other transaction, the most used addenda. Delivery of the contract. I'm going through the whole process just so you know, and then at the end, we're actually going to go through all of the contract. So I'm taking you through the process and then we're going to go through the contract. Delivery of the contract. After everything is executed, after all the negotiations are done and all parties have signed, then you're going to deliver the earnest money and option money to the title office. My frequently asked question is who gets all the docs? So here's a great rule of thumb. Whatever documents have both buyer and seller signature, that's a trigger to you that all parties should have those, right? If a buyer signed it and a seller signed, common sense, all parties should have a copy of that. Some disclosures just have the buyer's signature on. Those are ones that you keep for us in the brokerage. They're for you and your client and Keller Williams. So rule of thumb, if it's a document that has both buyer and seller signature on it, all parties must have a copy. What are those going to be? All the contract and addenda.
Does that mean title too, or just?
And title, yes. All parties, buyer, seller, buyer, seller's agents, lender, and title. You always want to make sure the lender is in the loop of everything that you do, and he has all the documents at all times. And then housekeeping, you're going to upload it into Command, the executed contract, all the addenda, disclosure, CMA, MLS, the listing, the tax records, lender approval letter, everything that you would have in your little file folder gets uploaded into Command. And Trek says you need to do that within 48 hours. And I want you guys to do that in 48 hours because also if you call me and you have an issue, I need to be able to go in and see those docs. If I get a call from your co-op agent on the other side that there's a oopsies or a dispute or a conflict, I need to see those documents. So we're required by the Texas Real Estate Commission to have those documents, the brokers to have those documents in a place that the Texas Real Estate Commission can have access to and see and get if they make that phone call, or that we do as leadership. And then title will run your title commitment and they order the surveys and they take the ball from there. Scheduling your inspections and re-inspections. As soon as you execute your contract, the next phone call you're making is to schedule your inspections and re-inspections. You want to have that conversation with your client that, yes, we're going to get the home inspected, but if we ask the seller to make repairs, who's going to do those re-inspections? You can't do them. You're in your option period, get her done. All negotiations must be complete. The buyer and seller need to be in a place of mutual agreement. So I can't tell you how many phone calls I get. It's 4 o'clock. An hour before their option period expires and I get a phone call, do we need to extend the option period because, we don't have an amendment signed? Or I haven't heard from the seller, I represent the buyer, I sent them a list, I haven't heard from the seller. Absolutely you do. You have to have by 5 o'clock mutual agreement of all parties of how you're moving forward. And guess what? It should be signed somewhere. So you should have a signed amendment, have it in writing. If not, if for some reason the buyer is still undecided, seller is still undecided, somebody's missing or AWOL, or somebody's abandoned the transaction, whatever the case may be, then you need to extend. Or if it's going really south and you just can't mutually agree on anything, then you need to terminate. That's what it's there for. Your client purchased that right to do that, so exercise that right. Is it good business practice to wait till between the hour of 4 and 5 to do that? No. Best business practice is you take care of things first thing in the morning. The only thing that should be hanging out in the afternoon is some really small little loose end that can be tied up by 5 o'clock. Schedule in your calendar your walkthrough and closings for appropriate dates and times. Close of escrow tip is Tuesday through Thursday is the best times of the week to close. And you'll walk through 24, 48 hours prior to close is best business practice. You want to understand as the buyer's agent, a walkthrough is not an inspection process. A walkthrough is just a simple 5-minute walkthrough before you head over to the title office to simply make sure, I say, very general terms, to make sure the house is still standing. Your inspection process should have been done during the option period. Your re-inspection process to check that those items were done that you asked the seller to do should have been done maybe a week or 2 after your request to do so.
So in that last walkthrough, you just mentioned, it's not an inspection, it's just a general walkthrough.
Mhm.
And you come across a buyer said, hey, these guys just moved out and they damaged the floors or something like that. While it's not an inspection type of issue.
So if you come across anything, during the walkthrough, the advice will always be is don't close. There's not enough time. If you've done a walkthrough 24 to 48 hours prior to close, and if it's even short, if it's that morning you're closing that, there's not enough time to try to get somebody to come out, do those repairs, renegotiate those repairs. And if your buyer closes, they have zero recourse to get anything done other than getting an attorney at that point. If something is wrong and not right, you have to give the bad news and say, I can't advise you to close, period. Is that going to make everybody mad? Absolutely. But the buyer has every right to close on a home based on appropriate expectations, right? It's not appropriate that there should be holes in the sheetrock that weren't there before. It's not appropriate that, they were supposed to fix these items. They didn't do it during the reinspection and you've waited. Now we're at closing and you go in, you do your last ditch effort and these things still aren't done. By the way, it's written in the contract that if the buyer asks for repairs and the seller didn't get them done, they have 5 days. They can extend escrow 5 days. So we've had many instances where our buyers just felt like they had to close and it was the worst mistake they ever did. So just don't close. You'll have to call the listing agent, say we got a problem.
So to be realistic, so
Yes.
if something does happen, and I know about the 5-day extension, most times if there's something that needs to be done, right now, it's nothing you can really get done immediately or what have you. What if you go outside of that 5 days? Is that at sellers kind of like a choice whether to extend out further than 5 days? Or
Yeah, you guys have to come to a new mutual agreement we got an issue. Hey, and you know what? Life happens, things happen, you know. I've had, you know, a couple days before closing, you know, they're packing up and the kids shove toys down the toilet and the toilet explodes and, you know, I mean, things happen. And you have to mutually agree, okay, this event occurred, so we need to fix it. We need to remedy it, whatever the case may be. And it brings you back to renegotiations again. And how do you put it in writing? These renegotiations is through the amendment. We're going to extend escrow because of this, this, and this.
So it's possible.
I Karen,
Absolutely.
Karen,
Question.
this is Simi. On the same lines, if this happens with the new build, usually the builder says because we have 1-year warranty and everything really will get, you know, amended. So how do we handle that situation before the closing? If we find something which they said they will repair, but they didn't, and they say we do have 1-year warranty and everything will be done.
Yeah, so in a new construction process, that's a little bit of a different process. And if you're working with a big builder, Perry Homes, Trendmaker, Beazer, they have a very regimented process to do that. And so they'll literally do like a blue tape process with you where you go through the home and you mark all your dings and dents. And I mean, we've had, you know, hot and cold faucets reversed, lots of things happen, right? I would always recommend on a new construction that you still have your buyer do a home inspection. And those can only be done on new construction very, very close to closing because the home has to be 97% complete. And builders do not put appliances and set up their mechanicals until almost a week before closing. So you have a really short window. So you have to really work really quick, but you want to definitely have a home inspection done. And then that inspection list can be given to the construction manager who does the walkthrough with the builder. And then they'll mark those on their to-do list. And a builder usually has a year to get all of that done. And so it could be done at that time. Or you could have your clients wait and before their year is up, resubmit, you know, submit the list to them. But each builder will have that as part of the contract that you sign in the beginning as to how their little process works of doing your little checklist of items that needs to be done and completed. Usually you have what we call 1 year bumper to bumper.
Okay, thank you.
This day and age, this market, I hear of builders not really working really well and really doing things in a different manner. I hear KB Homes has shortened up their punch list to 6 months, bumper to bumper. I've heard them not allowing inspection processes done. So then you make a business decision. Do you want to recommend that builder to your client? Do you want to work with them? I have a question in chat about the MUD notice. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the listing agent does not provide? Should I, as a selling agent, get it prepared? So yes, the MUD notice is required to be given to the buyer prior to execution of the contract by the seller. If you don't get one, I would go ahead and create one. I would let the listing agent know I'm creating this for you. This should have been provided, but we want to get it in the buyer's hands and get it done and then have all parties sign. It's one of those that it's somebody's responsibility, but if that someone doesn't do their job, you're going to step in and you're going to do the job for them. So did I answer your question, Nazar? Perfect. Okay. Prepare to close, and I'm going to go into our contract. So prepare to close. So right after your finance contingency has expired, your 21 days has gone through, you know you're getting the loan, you're good to go. You want to consult with the listing agent and make sure the seller and buyer are on the same page as far as the move out and the process and the expectations. You want to make sure you instruct the seller to keep utilities on, buyer transfer utilities in their name. Make sure title has everything scheduled. If the siding is taking place outside of the state, make sure you have all your special accommodations that are tended to, and the title company can help you with those, and you prepare to get yourself closed. So that's the whole process. I have it all detailed in the PowerPoint, and you guys can use that as a little cheat sheet to walk you through. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, you guys, and I'm going to take you through. We're going to look at the contracts. And what time is it? 11:07. So we have a little bit over an hour to get through them, and I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get through those. Mhm. Yeah, I could, yeah. So the question was, if you have something in escrow right now, can somebody go in and check your documents? And the answer is yes. So in Zoom, you should all be looking at the 1 to 4 family. For those of you here, let's get out your little pamphlet that I gave you. We're at the 1 to 4 family. And in Zoom, note you do not see that. So, okay. Let me go ahead and share. Okay, now we're all on the same page. Okay, so here we are, the 1 to 4 family. So paragraph 1 is the parties to the transaction. Simple, get it from the tax records, you make sure they match the driver's license. Paragraph 2A, the legal description of the house. You get that from the tax records. What I really want to talk about is B, C, and D. B, C, and D is your talking point. So when you're going through the contract, the 1 to 4 family, the first 5 minutes of your conversation is going to be on paragraph B, C, and D. So the role play is Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, about to send you over the contract and addenda. I'd like to spend at least 30 minutes going through those with you. We're going to go through the highlights. If my client says to me, oh, I bought and sold a lot of property, you don't need to do that. I say, I appreciate that, but you know, the contracts change every couple of years. So I just want to spend 20 minutes on going through that. And I asked them, do you want to meet in person or do you want to do this online? So whatever the case may be. So I'm sitting down in front of them, we're going through it, and I'll say to them, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the parties of the transaction, these are the sellers. I got that from our tax records. Please make sure and correct me if your name is not spelled right. This should match your driver's license, which you gave me earlier. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is the legal description of your home. And I'd like to go through paragraph B, C, and D with you. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it says that these improvements and accessories go with the home. Can you just read through those, or I'll read through these with you, and let's just make sure that we're on the same page as to what you expected to go with the house or didn't go with the house. Paragraph B, C, and D gets more realtors in trouble than not. You want to make sure you understand as the realtor what is staying, what's conveying, and what is not conveying. That's the term, convey. What goes with the house. In today's world, the biggest hangups are the TVs that are hanging on the wall, wine chillers, the egg barbecue out in the built-in barbecue, speakers, surround sound. You know, we had an issue where they had all these rocks out in the garden in the backyard that provided surround sound. Well, they're personal property. They're like little gnomes that are out there, right? They don't go with the house. And of course, the buyer wanted it. She thought it was part of the surround sound because it was described in the MLS as surround sound. Well, that's not what surround sound is. Listing agent made a marketing mistake, but because it wasn't even written in the contract, it doesn't go. So you want to make sure you understand improvements and accessories like the back of your hand. And exclusions pertains to paragraph B, C. Exclusions are you're excluding the items that B and C must stay. Say that must stay. So I'm excluding those out. So D goes with B and C. Sales price. Once a buyer says in here what they're doing, they're committed to that. If a buyer says they're doing financing and that we're going to disclose on a third-party addendum, and they say I'm doing a conventional loan, they can't just change their mind. If they're saying they're buying cash, they can't just change their mind and do finance. It's default of the contract. So you want to make sure your buyer is sure of what they're doing. And by now, by the time you're writing this, you would have had 2 conversations about that. What they're putting down must be what they're putting down, what they're getting their loan for, and your ultimate sales price. If there's a lease that goes with the house, if you're representing an investor and there's a tenant and a lease in play, then paragraph 4 comes into play. I'm not going to go into that in detail because that's a rarity. Most all of you are representing buyers to own as their primary residence. I do a leases class and I'll go in that in depth. The next paragraph you want to highlight and you want to spend 5 and 10 minutes discussing with your client is paragraph 5. So far you got 5 and 10 minutes into paragraph 2. You want to spend 5 minutes on paragraph 5. This is your earnest money and option period paragraph. Hopefully you gave them the general info and notice to buyer. We're going to cover that disclosure where it talks about this. It explains this in detail. But if you did not, this is the time to address it and make sure they understand. And I will tell them, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it's customary to put 1% earnest money into escrow and pay a fee to have the right, the option to terminate this contract. And you will have 3 days to get it to the title company. Do you have any issues with getting the money to the title company? The question they always ask is, how do I get my earnest money back? And I tell them, if we sign this contract tonight and execute this contract tonight, and in the next morning you have remorse and you call me and you say you want to terminate, you've changed your mind, I'm going to say that's okay. However, you are now in a binding contract and I still need you to get to escrow and drop off your earnest money and your option fee, because then that gives you the right to go ahead and terminate. Question?
Who delivered the earnest money and the option?
Who what?
Who delivered?
Who delivers?
Yeah.
I would instruct the buyer to deliver it themselves. I would, they can give it to you if you need to. I mean, that's a service that you provide. Say they're working, they're at Halliburton and they can't get out of work and they have a cashier's check. You can go ahead and pick it up and bring it to the title company for them. This day and age, most title companies have apps and ways to wire money through. You want to do what is the most efficient way to get that done. So after I execute my contract, I'm going to call the title company first thing in the morning, 8:30 a.m., ring a ding ding. Hi, I'm Karen with Keller Williams Premier. I am opening up an escrow. I represent the buyer. What is the best way to get you the earnest money today and the option fee? And she's going to say, give me your client's information. We'll take care of it. 99% of the title companies will say, no worries. We got this. And the title company will take care of it if they're a good title company. And that's why you want to work with a good title company. And most listing agents do. So one check, one payment for both the earnest money and the option fee is to be delivered to the title office in 3 days. 5A1, additional earnest money. This is used for very large purchases, backup offers. It's very rare that you use it. I will walk you through if you have an extenuating circumstances in which you need to use additional earnest money. But typically, if I'm buying $1 million, $2 million house, and my earnest money needs to be 100 grand or 200 grand, I might put 50 grand up front, and then the other 150 after I get through my option period. Big ticket items, big money items. Typically, we don't put a whole bunch of lump sum down right in the beginning. We spread it out. And then the termination option period, these are the number of days. So you want to explain to your client how this works. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we have 3 days to get this through. You're going to give $250 to the seller. You're buying the right to have this option period to terminate for any reason. But you won't have that right unless you pay for it and deliver that money to the title office. You want to make sure you stress that point, because do we have buyers that change their mind? Yes. And it's not okay for them to just feel like they can walk away, because they can't. Your duty is to perform what's supposed to be performed, and then you do a termination and a release of earnest money. That's how it works. We have instances where you can't control your client, and the client says, I'm not giving you any money. Then you have to refer them. Well, you're going to have to get an attorney at that point. It's your job to make sure, and you would have schooled them on this during the consultation process, right? So see how if you do the legwork up front, it makes this process so much easier.
Question on earnest money termination of 5-1. Is there ever, what is an instance you would put anything in number 1?
So yeah, so that is for the question for Zoomers. 5-1 again is that in the instance, couple instances, one would be a very large purchase, a $2 million, $3 million home where you have a large earnest money deposit. If I was representing somebody of that caliber, I'd probably put 50 grand down. My earnest deposit is 200,000. I'd put 50 grand down and then 150 after we got through our option period.
Doing an addendum.
I would do here, additional earnest money, 150.
No,
Within, say my option period down here is 7, I put within 8 days, additional 150.
Okay.
So I'd have 50,000 up here at the top, 150, 8 days, and my option period, 7 days.
For those of us in the normal 5 million, number 1.
Exactly, rarely ever used. The other instance you use that is for a backup offers. Again, 2 instances where it's rarely ever used and it's appropriate. We don't leave blanks in the contract, so we're going to put NA.
So question, sorry, on in the hopes that I do go to fire, in option, in earnest money is $200,000. Why wouldn't you put 200,000 on top? You want to risk that much money?
Yeah, you know, if I'm gonna have an option period, typically on a large home like that, I have a very long option period because there's a lot to inspect. And so we just don't want to tie up a whole lot of money. There's a likelihood that you can terminate. And so just giving them, and in those cases, the option fee here is probably $1,000, $1,500. So it's a lot of money being tied up. And those people, they're really concerned about that because in escrow, it doesn't collect interest, right? So if I have 200 grand sitting collecting interest and I'm somebody of means, I'm not happy with that. So I want to keep my 150 in the bank, collecting some money. No problem. Let's get through the option period. I'm going to give you a chunk of money, but let's all get through this process and then I'll gladly bring the rest of my money down. That's the mindset on that. So paragraph 5, you're going to spend 10 minutes on, right? Yes, you all understand how it works, so that way you can regurgitate and educate the consumer on how it works. And it's okay to have buyer's remorse, but they still have to get the money to the table. So what happens if they don't get the money to the table? They're 1, in default, and 2, can a TREC complaint be filed against you? Yes. So you want to make sure they get the money to the table. Title policy and survey. You want to explain, spend maybe 2 minutes on this for the consumer, the title policy and survey. You're going to let them know that the title company is going to give them free title and deed without encumbrances. But the title and deed doesn't cover oopsies and mistakes in the survey, or if there's some encroachments or something oddball that shows up, those things aren't covered. So we have a little extra rider policy that they can purchase. It's a percentage of the title policy, the cost of the title policy. So in some cases, it's $100, $120. And that covers them for those little, what we call shortages in the area, little mistakes and oopsies and encroachments and in the survey. I have a sheet on that, on how, if you want really good verbiage to explain that. Also sitting down and having that coffee or lunch with your title officer, she can explain that into detail, so that way you can regurgitate that to the consumer and explain to them exactly what that is. But I just let them know that we're going to get it. I'm going to get a title commitment shortly after we open escrow, and I'll review it, and the title company will review it for liens and encumbrances and those things and encroachments. Paragraph 6 comes into play a lot. You don't hear about it. It's not one of those glorified mistakes, but it happens a lot. We have lots of encroachments, liens that pop up, bankruptcies that pop up, lots of stuff pop up. And it's your job to navigate through those. And so that's why, again, you want to work with a good title office that's going to help you do that. When you represent a buyer, the listing agent picks the title office. So sometimes you don't have the luxury of working with somebody good.
Is that true if the buyer wants to pay this market? Buyers, a lot of them are paying.
Yeah, if the buyer's paying for the title policy, absolutely, you want to negotiate to have it in a place that you want. Does it always go that way? No. It's a back and forth issue. And it's an issue for the sign of the times. It'll go back the other, swing back the other way, probably this next year, that, you know, this time next year. So if you have a title issue and you're with a title office that you don't know anybody there and you're not comfortable with, bring it to a title office that you are comfortable with. Go next door to Traditions, to Janet, and they'll help you. That's why you want to have these vendors in your pocket. That way you can call them and say, hey, I've got this escrow at Chicago Title. I am not confident they know what they're doing. I'm not confident that I could sit down with them for them to explain this to me. Do you mind looking at it? And if you're doing business and they're a partner of ours, they're going to help you and walk you through it. The next part of the contract you want to spend some time in is the survey. The trend is Shamark C1 that we're going to use the seller's survey. When you got the sellers, when you were writing an offer and you got the seller's disclosure and you reviewed the seller's disclosure, you looked on there and it's seller marked that there's a survey and a T47 attached. So that's why you're going to fill this in here. Or when you had your conversation with the listing agent to say, hey, I'm presenting an offer, and you're doing that bantering back and forth, and you asked the seller providing a survey, they said yes. This is how this paragraph comes into play. However, the survey is proprietary. It is owned by the current owner. So if your client wants to put a pool in or any improvements down the road, the survey is useless to them. So if your client says, hey, I'm going to be putting a pool in, I'm doing a bunch of improvements to this land, it's in their best interest to just go buy a new survey now at the time of closing. Word has it that to do this third party after the fact, this costs almost 2 to 3 times the amount of money. So if they're buying a property that they're going to want to do improvements, it's best time now is for them to buy a new one. The reason that we use the seller's ones to save a few bucks, $600. When you're buying real estate, $600 is nothing. But if that's what, for a first time home buyer, maybe that's a lot of money to them, you go ahead and you use it. The survey and T47 go together. They are not separate. They are like Siamese twins. They're Twinkies. They stay together. You can't have one without the other. If the listing agent provides you the survey and not the T47, you need to hound them for the T47. Paragraph D, objections.
Question, sorry.
Uh-huh.
C1, in the event a survey and T47 are provided, but the title company deems the survey not valid
Uh-huh.
or usable,
Or usable.
then this paragraph here says the seller will buy. In
Mhm.
this particular example, the seller will buy the survey.
Correct. So we asked the seller is to provide within 3 days after we go to escrow, the sellers to furnish us the survey and the T47. If the seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit, the buyer shall obtain a new survey at the seller's expense no later than 3 days. So regardless of what I checked here, this paragraph supersedes. So if the seller failed to give me that, and the T47 goes along with it, then the buyer shall obtain a new survey. And the title company is the one that orders it. So the title company is going to be on the phone that says, hey, the clock's ticking. Where is this information? And I could tell you the listing agent and seller is going to be very angry if they get charged for something that they have already had. So what's your best business practice? If I have 3 days in here and it's day 2 and I don't see this, I'm calling the agent, hey, we got a oopsies here, let's fix it. You want to work in partnership with them, not adversarial, right? Hey, I don't want your seller and you getting charged and getting mad. Let's not upset the apple cart. Do you have it? Do you not have it? What do we need to do here? That's the win-win, right? You work together. Some agents will say, well, that's the seller's problem, so screw them, let them figure it out. Well, what happens, it causes now a friction in the transaction. Do you have to negotiate with them? Yeah, you got an option period that you got to deal with. You got other things you have to deal with. So do you think that would be a win-win scenario if you're already off the bat putting a seller in back against the corner, or a buyer is back against the corner? It doesn't work well for the transaction. So work as a team to get it done. Objections. This paragraph you don't have to spend a lot of time on, but depending on the product that your client is buying, it may be important or it may not. If you're buying something in the inner loop on Galveston Island, you're buying something that's probably 20, 30 years old, you want to spend time on this paragraph. If you're buying a Cinco Ranch house, 5 years old, tract, subdivision lot, not much you can do about it. This paragraph has to do with the title commitment and the survey and all the schedules, all the sections, they're called schedules, that come into play when the title office does their job. If something says in the deed, it's this, this, and this, but the survey says otherwise, you have a conflict in documents. The title company says, okay, we have an issue here. One might be right, one might be wrong. We don't know. That's an issue. we call that, we have an issue and we now need a cure period. We need time for the seller to cure this problem. So it's already written in here that the seller has 15 days to cure. The buyer doesn't have to accept that. The buyer can still walk away. Real life problems. Pools are an issue and fences are usually what comes up to play in here. So we have a home in the Heights, you know, it's 70 years old. And back in the day, in the 1970s, you know, the HOA was a small HOA and they remodeled some things and they let the homeowner, you know, put a pool in and a fabulous patio and concrete patio. At the time, you know, there was green space there, the HOA wasn't using it. And so things got a little skewed. So we got a pool, a gorgeous patio, and encroaches into now HOA space. So here we are years later, we represent the buyer and the buyer is looking at this old survey, that looks okay. But in the title commitment, it says, well, you know, there's an easement for the HOA. It's a 15-foot easement from here. We have to allow green space. We have to allow people a walking trail, people and the buyer says, well, no, that's my land. I've got a pool and patio on there. So now what? We got a problem. So the seller has to cure that. And the only way to really cure that properly is the seller has to rip everything out, put gravel in, put the fence where it needs to be. That's the proper cure. Or the title company says we can do an exception. And if the buyer signs the exception, we'll do an exception. An exception means they pull that section out. We're going to go ahead and give you a deed and title, but this is going to be made an exception. We're not going to warranty this. We're not going to insure this. You all agreed to go ahead and move forward. Buyer, you agreed to buy this with this exception and take responsibility of what comes down the pike. HOA suing them not being able to sell it down the road. That's going to be all on them. So that's why this paragraph comes into play. And when it does, it's a very, very serious thing that needs to be taken care of. So as you can see, depending on your type of buyer and the product they're buying, you would spend time on it or not spend time on it. The other issue we have is if they're buying a lot or they're buying, well, that goes kind of unimproved property contract. I don't want to go into that, but for the 1 to 4 family, that would be the most common objection. I'm not going to go into the other stuff. Membership in an HOA, you want to spend time on this paragraph, only about a minute or two, just explaining that they're buying an HOA. There's going to be transfer fees and fees. Fees to buy in there, capitalization fees. If they're buying in Cross Creek Ranch, it's very expensive to buy in there as a buyer. So you want to explain to them those extra costs. And then this section, how I go over this with them is I tell them, here's some legalese. If we're buying in Cinco Ranch, I would say nothing really pertains to other than 6, that you're going to be buying in a mud district. And I explained to them that the mud district is like a mud tax, it's your water and sewer tax. And I explained to them there's transfer fees for the HOA. And if they're buying a water view or a water lot, say they're buying in Grayson Lakes, right? And they're buying a beautiful home on the water, I'll explain to them what the state of Texas means by notice of water level fluctuations. Meaning that you could use your paddle boat or your motorboat right now, but if we're in a drought situation and the county, the city, or the state needs that water, you might be walking in that lake and not swimming in it, right? It's part of the process. Paragraph 7. This is a highlight paragraph you want to spend time on. This is another big paragraph that either busts out a transaction or causes a dispute between the listing agent and the buyer agent. I could tell you sellers who do not get this explained to them, 90% of the time misinterpret buyer accepts the property as is. I can't tell you how many phone calls in my career I've had to deal with disputes of a seller thinking he sold his property where it is as is and didn't have to do any repairs. We do not sell homes as is where is. We sell homes as we see it. We make an offer on your initial offer on a real estate transaction is how you see the home as its wear and tear condition as I see it now. My offer to you, Mr. Seller, is based on, the carpet's worn, I need to paint, I need a new roof. I can see that the condition doesn't warrant market value, so I'm offering you this price. Or, my gosh, this home is dressed to the nines, pride of ownership. I see, Mr. Seller, you live at Home Depot. I'm giving you top dollar. That's how my offer is based. However, so I accept the property as is. However, I reserve the right, it's built into the contract, that I'm going to have inspections done. And you have to keep the utilities on. And based on those inspections, I might negotiate repairs or treatments, or I might terminate this contract. That's all that is said in paragraph 7. That's a lot to say, isn't it? So you want to make sure if you're representing the seller or the buyer that you explain this paragraph properly.
So as is going to be as you see it. That's
Right,
not
buyer
always-
accepts the property as it is today, as I see it today. I can't see behind the walls, under the sink. I'm not an inspector. It's I'm accepting the wear and tear and condition as I see it today. And that's exactly how I explain it to my client, the buyer. And when I represent the seller and I go over this contract, that's how I explain it to him. Mr. Seller, they retain the right to go ahead and get inspections done and negotiate for repairs and terminate during the option period. Doesn't mean the seller can sell the home and the buyer must take it for face value and no repairs are done and no negotiations are taking place. This is not what it means. It means the total opposite. And so if you can make sure you get that across to both your listing, your seller and your buyers, you will have a smooth transaction. When you don't go through that and you let them read this on their own, it's very confusing. And I can tell you, when they don't get explained this paragraph, half of them take it to mean one way and half of them take it to mean the other way. And it's a problem. When you would mark D2, buyer accepts the property as is, provided the seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repair and treatment. This is used for situations, and I put in there like remove the trampoline. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm offering you $250 for the house, but before I've done any inspections, I accept, this is my offer based on what I see it, but I want that trampoline removed. So normally what you see in here is remove trampoline, remove shed. You could put replace carpet in there. It's something that the buyer sees now and they tell you, I want the house, but right away, without even doing inspections, like, I want this done.
At that point in time, they can either decide to get that done or have money given back. Is that?
No, this paragraph 2 is not that. Paragraph 2 means that this is part of my offer. This needs to be done for the offer to be accepted. It's not a negotiation thing. This is part of the contract. This is what I want, period, end. Things like carpet or paint, maybe, those are wear and tear conditions, and maybe it's something you put in there, because if you ask during the repair period, that might turn a seller off. The repair period, and this is conversation you have here explaining this, I'm sorry, going back, sorry, Zoomers, don't get dizzy. Okay, explaining this paragraph is when you explain to them, you know, your option period and getting your inspections done. That's for the systems of the home: plumbing, electrical, heating and air, roof, foundation, and pool system if there's a pool. That's what your inspection process for, is for the systems of the house. It's not for cosmetics. It's not for wear and tear. It's not for maintenance. Your initial offer is for those things. Remember, initial offer: maintenance, wear and tear, and condition as you see the house. If your client says, oh my gosh, you know, I got to replace the carpet, I need to remodel the kitchen, you know, I need paint, you have a conversation, is this the house you really want? So then your offer is going to reflect that. And then I tell her, we're going to do an inspection process. That's not for that. The inspection process is the toilet leaks, the shower leaks, the garage door won't open, the mechanicals, the windows won't lock and latch. That's what that's for. Two separate negotiations. And then this is for those items that you want to remove and replace, that part of the, you know, the offer right away. This is, if you don't do this, we have no deal, right? Because it's right here into the contract.
Have you seen anything extreme in that?
In here,
Yeah, like,
extreme, no,
no. So,
there's nothing really, you know. One thing that could be in here is during hurricane season, or we have hail season, what you'll see, and that's seasonal for the city of Houston here, is because we have hurricanes and we have hailstorms, is that there's a homeowner in the middle of replacing a roof. So I would put in here to roof to be completed. You know, you go to the house and, I mean, poor guy, he put it on the market, a hailstorm came or a hurricane came and this roof blew off. I mean, what are you going to do? Life happens. So we're in the process of putting the roof on. So I might put that in there, sell it to complete roof, provide warranty and paperwork to the buyer. Because that's something we see going on right now, right? So I wanted to address in the contract. He needs to finish the roof. Just because you started it and we went into contract, don't stop. Oh, I sold my house, I don't need to finish the roof. No, finish the roof. Paragraph F, completion of repairs and treatments. This gets everybody in trouble and you want to spend some time. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when we ask for repairs, the seller has built into the contract, they have up until the closing to get them done. If they're not done, we can extend the closing for 5 days. I'm going to negotiate those repairs for you, but I need to know how you want to reinspect those, because I'm going to negotiate that those repairs get done way before we close. How do you want to handle those? That's how I explain this paragraph. Lender required repairs. So lender required repairs, those would be if your buyer is an FHA or VA buyer. Those are insured government loans. So the government has some very stringent restrictions on, if I'm going to insure this loan for this buyer, Wells Fargo Bank, when you send your appraiser out, he needs to make sure that none of these issues are in his appraisal, because guess what? I'm not going to insure this loan for you, Wells Fargo Bank. So when the appraiser goes out there, the appraiser has a little checklist. He has a checklist. Okay, I have an FHA loan product, a VA loan product. FHA and VA say if they're insured, they need to have this, this, and this. And that's what he goes and looks for. What are they looking for? Hazardous wires hanging out, wood rot, termite rot, some kind of infestation, encroachments and easements, something that makes that property, one, can't get hazard insurance, or two, some kind of hazard or dangers to a human being that the government doesn't want to be on the hook for, basically.
So conventional loans,
They will not have those. Conventional loan will not have lender required repairs. These are required repairs the lender requires for them to issue their government insured product.
so let's say the home, I had a home, that, we did inspections, but the water was never turned on, and my client accepted because he had one issues. It was a home that had several repairs,
Mhm.
and he accepted, we went through inspections. When the water was never turned on, I mean, it was terrible, so many things wrong with it.
Mhm.
And one of the issues, well, the issues is, that happens is that if we had the price go down, it was eventually gone, the price would remain out of the past. So that's what the lender said.
Mhm.
And so it was like, I mean, is that? what- I
That's
mean,
different because they couldn't check a system of a house. So when the lender issues money, they need to make sure the house has some basic,
Right.
it has to be habitable, right? Especially if they said that this is going to be their primary residence. Were they buying it as a primary residence or investment? Investment.
But it would be.
Yeah, so with an investment loans are riskier, right? They require more money down, and they require certain things. So that lender had some requirements. If I'm going to make an investment, and I know this house, there's certain things that it has to have.
Water.
Yeah, and the systems have to be, why doesn't it have water? Is it not connected from the street? Is the plumbing issue in the house? So they have every right to kind of hope, because that can't be checked and inspected, and that's a huge problem. So that's an extenuating circumstance, and that's part of the investor type loan and who was backing that loan.
When you mention like, any issues, like how would you like to handle this? Like which, in terms of, how would the buyer like to handle that? Is that what you?
So what happens is when this comes into play is the lender's going to send a notice out to all parties and say, we have lender required repairs. The seller is not obligated to do those. Especially, it says in here, if it's 5% more than the sales price. So what happens, this becomes a negotiating point. And if parties can't mutually agree, always remember mutually agree, then guess what? You have to terminate and the buyer gets their earnest money back.
Yeah. and
Can't make the
this-
seller do it.
Yeah, in this case, we signed, my client signed a document saying that when another person has said the problem, even though he did all this inspection. that was-
Right,
but then it was the price of that.
yeah. And he was allowed to do that because that was a conventional loan and you didn't have the government in the way. If it was a government-backed loan, he would not have been able to waive that. Residential service contract, this is something that is the 1-year home warranty for the buyer. I would say as good business practice, you should always try to negotiate a 1-year home warranty for your client. Some home warranty plans are better than others. You want to get to know some home warranty reps. I had Amy in here for American Home Shield the other day. She has a fabulous plan. I put in 625 because I know that's the max plan I can get. Because I want the best for my clients. And so this is a great thing. This is one of the services I sell. So Mr. and Mrs. Barr, I'm going to negotiate to get you a residential service contract. In today's world, what is going on today, June 2021? This is gone away to make the pot sweeter in your negotiations. Can a buyer buy it after? A buyer can buy it after, or you as the buyer's agent can split the cost and buy it for them. But the reality in today's market is that we're having to put 0 or NA in here to get your deal through. In a normal market, 99% of the time you're negotiating and you're getting a residential service contract for your buyer. But in today's world, if you need to compete, this is one of those you can take off the table.
And the buyer is just doing it offline, like after
The buyer has 30 days after they close to go ahead and buy one on their own. I'm not going to discuss this paragraph. That's real estate 101. Closing, paragraph 9. You want to spend some time on that. You want to make sure you and the listing agent are on the same page as to how closing is going to happen. You want to make sure you look at the calendar and pick the right date. I'm blown away and amazed how many times I get a phone call where the agent says, oh, I picked a Saturday or Sunday. What do I do? Well, now you have to amend the contract. Don't be a ding dong. Don't put Saturday and Sunday. Make sure you check the calendar. Yes. You pick the right day. And make sure it works with everybody. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Typically, we close in 30 to 35 days. Let's look at the calendar. Project out, you know, when that would be. Can you take off that day? Will you be here? It's okay to make it 32 or 34. Pick the right date in the calendar that works for everybody. Possession. You want to spend time on this paragraph and explain to them that when they sign and fund, they take possession of the property. So as the buyer's agent, you have to make sure that a week before you're getting them the utility information so they can have the utilities turned on in their name on this day. It's your job and the buyer's job to get the utilities turned on in their name for the closing day, not the seller's job, your job. Special provisions. We never write anything in special provisions. TREC says if there's a paragraph in all of our contracted addenda that addresses every issue. So if your client comes up with an issue or has an issue with something, it's probably somewhere in the contract or addenda. If he brings up an issue to you and you're not sure, give me a call and I could help you find where it is in one of the contracts or the addenda that address it. The only thing we can put in special provisions is something that's given to us by our client. I'm really going to allow that to happen, or mainly an attorney has an issue with something that has to go in there. So what do we use special provisions for? Sometimes we put it in there, a name, you know, like I'll put in there, this is this person's name on their driver's license. However, they are a foreigner and this is their name. With foreigners, they have very long names or 2-3 names. It doesn't fit on a license. And so I will put it in special provisions that the buyer is also known as and put their long name in. A lot of ethnic groups have very different types of names and their US ID can't cover all of that. And so that's something I would put in special provision. That's just really putting everybody on notice. This is one and the same person. Otherwise, there's really nothing else to put in there. Settlement and other costs. We don't have the market for this paragraph to come into play these days. This might be an important paragraph next year. But right now, this is for a buyer who, first-time buyer who needs closing costs paid by the seller. You guys are very fortunate as realtors. You probably never even use this paragraph anymore. I mean, there was a period in my day, decades ago, where every contract buyer needed help with closing costs. So I'm not going to really go into that. Let's talk about default and mediation and escrow. I explained this section to the client as Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we're going to have a couple of contingencies in place for you. You have a finance contingency and you have your option period. Beyond that, if you decide to change your mind or can't close a transaction, you're going to be in default. I can't deem you default, the listing agent can't deem you default, the title company, the contract says you're in default. But if that happens, attorneys will have to get involved. That's just the bottom line of it. We don't have executory powers or judicial powers. The contract says you're a default, but we can't enforce those things. So if somebody goes into default, 99.9% of the time, we're having to get an attorney to help us out of the mess. So what I want to go through next is, I'm not going to go through the rest of this, is real estate 101 stuff. So I want to go through the third-party financing addendum. Sorry, guys, we might run late. It's 12 o'clock already, and I'm not even getting through half of our contracts, but we're going to run through some really important things I need to make sure you understand. Third-party contract, this addenda has come into play a lot, hot topic in this. Again, if a buyer says they're doing one type of loan, they can't change their mind. You'd have to notify the seller and all parties. You have to come to a mutual agreement whether you can do that or not. So you have to educate your buyer that if you're going to go one way, you have to stick with it. If you're not sure by now, then you should have never wrote a contract. Big things you need to understand about the third party. The third party is a finance contingency. And there's two parts to that. Part one, buyer approval. Part two, property approval. They're two different things. The addenda says the buyer has 21 days to get buyer approval. This is pertaining to the human being, to him getting his credit checked, his assets, his income, his job verified. It has to do with the human getting approval from the lender. The second is property approval. The buyer approval, whatever days you put in there, that's how long he has to get his approval. 21 days is customary. Property approval pertains to the real estate. If the buyer's lender determines that the property does not satisfy lender's underwriting requirements for the loan, including, but not only limited to, the appraisal, insurability, repairs, then the buyer, no later than 3 days before closing, can terminate the contract. So we have buyer approval for a certain amount of days, but we have property approval up until 3 days before closing. I can't tell you how many times realtors don't understand these two paragraphs. You need to understand these like the back of your hand and how it works.
Do the lenders usually like
Hmm?
do the lenders usually like that long?
No. If buyer terminates under this paragraph, the earnest money would be funded to the buyer. If buyer does not terminate under this paragraph, property approval is deemed to have been obtained. The biggest issue in property approval obviously is appraisal. However, if the home doesn't come to value, it doesn't appraise, that doesn't mean that they get out or they could deny the loan. If they have a lot of cash in the bank, the lender doesn't have to deny the loan, they restructure the loan. So this isn't an automatic termination or denial of the loan. FHA VA buyer, if they want to write a contract and they want to offer a certain amount and they're willing to put some money and skin in the game if the house doesn't appraise, this is how a FHA and VA buyer addresses that issue. This is their appraisal limit. Most realtors think this has to match the contract price. It does not. This is their appraisal limit price.
So if it doesn't appraise for the appraisal limit, so say that's a 195 in the box, the appraisal comes in at 188, the $7,000 difference. The buyer.
Right.
can
If they,
choose-
yeah, if they put 188 in here, that says that they're okay with that.
No, put 195 in here, but the appraisal comes in lower.
Oh, if they put 195 and the appraisal comes in lower, no, they're not obligated to pay that difference.
Okay, but they can if they want to.
They can, they always can. With an FHA VA buyer, it says in here, they reserve the right to do that. but they can
They can also terminate.
they can terminate and get their earnest money back. If they've set an amount in here and it meets that amount, then they have to go through with it. Right? For, let me just check in chat. About clause D, we were told just to put residential in number of days. Does this make any sense for you? Clause D, sorry, Nazar, I just saw your chat question. He's going back to that other paragraph. There's a question. It says residential use up here on the 1 to 4 family. You don't have to put residential use as an objection in there. If you're buying a home for residential use, it's for residential use. What you want to put in there is if you're buying a home and you want also commercial. The advertisement says it's residential and commercial. You want to put commercial in there because you want to make sure the deed and all that comes through where there's no objections of me using the house for residential and commercial use.
It's assumed residential,
yes,
otherwise.
Yes.
state.
You're buying a 1 to 4 residential, you're using a 1 to 4 residential contract, automatically deemed in there, it's for residential use. So you want to make sure you understand this is geared for your FHA VA buyer. That's why we have the addenda for appraisal for conventional, because we can play with the appraisal price on a conventional loan. And then I want you guys to understand this. 5, authorization to release information. This is built into the addenda that says the buyer authorizes the buyer's lender to furnish to seller or buyer or their representatives information relating to the status of the approval of the financing. Sorry, guys. Seller and buyer authorize buyer's lender, title company, and escrow agent to disclose and furnish a copy of the closing disclosures and settlement statement provided in relation to the closing of this sale. So we have already boilerplated in there the authority for those lender representatives to let us know what's going on. Do they have to give us the details? No, it's for the status. So important things I want you guys to understand about third party is to understand how that finance contingency works, that your client can't just change their mind, and that we can disclose information. The next one I want to get to really quickly is the HOA. When you're representing the buyer, this is the form that you put together. Lots of listing agents put this together and upload it into the listing as part of their MUD and seller's disclosure. You don't have to sign that. This is a form that is negotiable, and it should be put together by the buyer's agent. And if your client is buying in a very expensive homeowners association, Cinco Ranch is very expensive, Cross Creek Ranch is very expensive, Town Lake, Bridgeland, the very expensive HOAs, it's your duty to call them and find out what are all the fees involved in purchasing. And where you get that information is from the MLS. Oh, the addenda for mandatory membership is right after the third party.
I know.
Right after the third party. Sorry for you guys following along. So it's your job to call the HOA, POA, and find out what those fees are if the listing agent hasn't given those to you. And I don't always take at face value what the listing agent knows or doesn't know. When I have a client buying in those, I'm calling the HOA to see what those fees are, because they're not $200-300, they're thousands of dollars. And that's a big mistake to make. So you want to make sure you get it right.
So for Cross Creek Ranch. I call it that.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a lot of dollars.
Yes, a great resource also is the title company. Traditions Next Door, those who are local here in Cinco, do they not close in those subdivisions every day? They see those fees every day. So again, you're your next best partner in this industry, in your career, is your title officer. Absolutely, great resource to call them and say, hey, I have a client buying in there. Do you mind just running through today what those fees are? Can they change? They can change every year. The HOA can have a meeting, a board meeting, and they can change those things. So just because it was one way last year doesn't mean it's going to be the same this year. You need always current information. What's current, 3 months or less. So you want to make sure that you order the subdivision information for your buyer. That's best business practice. And you want to make sure what the transfer fees and other fees that might come into play are. So you're going to verify those. Yes. We have Catherine has a question on the floor. What's that?
Like when I got a contract, we put they put the 220 in there and they said it's the buyer, say whatever. Email the title company saying it cost $148 for something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's different fees. There's transfer fees, there's title cert fees, and actually title cert, there's 2 different title cert fees. One title certification fee happens right before closing, and that's when the title company will call the HOA and make sure that the seller is in good standing. And that one's a couple of $100. And that one is just to make sure that their dues are paid on time, they don't have any judgments, you know, they're don't have any issues and those things. Then there's the certification title certs, or rules and regulations, covenants, conditions, and all of that whole package. That could be another $400 or $500. That's the minutes of the meeting, all the meats and potatoes of buying an HOA.
HOA statement of account
Mm-hmm.
closing.
Yeah,
That's an addition to any transfer.
yes, that's an addition to. Statement of account is an addition
I'm
to.
not checking correctly.
And then, so you have statement account, you have title cert fees, you have your rules and regulations fees for those documents. Then you have capitalization fees. That's a fee just to buy in the community.
But in this case, well, title company, there are more things.
So the buyer's agent was responsible for filling it out. We just didn't check the box.
Mhm,
So I got an email from the title company saying, who's paying for this?
mhm.
And I called the buyer's agent. I said, can you get that box checked and sent back over?
Mhm.
But I will definitely make sure the next time I get a contract.
Yeah.
that box is checked.
Right. And when you represent the buyer, right? So if I represent the seller, I want the buyer paying all that. If I represent the buyer, I want the seller paying all that. And some HOAs mandate that the buyer has to pay that, and the seller has to pay that. So unless you're selling in a particular community all the time, and you're a top producer and you close every week in there, you won't know. It's your job to call and find out what are all the fees involved. And they'll give you a rundown. The title office will give you a rundown. The point is, know it now, because it's an addenda. It's a part of the contract. So you can't make a mistake, because you're making it part of the contract. So if you don't know and your buyer wants to write an offer, you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna do this, but I'm gonna need an afternoon to make this phone call and find out what these fees are. I'm gonna need a couple hours to make a phone call and find out what these fees are. Or you can be proactive, and if you have a client looking to buy in Cinco Ranch, I'd call them up and find out before my client makes an offer.
You can call the title company or the HOA.
Title company or the HOA. So let's look at the amendment real quick. I want you guys to understand the amendment. This is something that you're going to use regularly in your real estate transactions. An amendment is a change to the contract. Every number in this amendment points back to a paragraph in the contract. Number 1 points to the finance section of the 1 to 4 family. This one pertains to paragraph 3 of the 1 to 4 family. This is where if they have to change the down payment, the amount of the loan, and/or sales price, Paragraph 2. This is where you negotiate for your repairs. 3 is where you change your closing date. 4 is used for 2 purposes. 1, you have to change the amount that the seller is going to contribute to the buyer's closing cost. But most importantly, 12A is used for repair money. It's customary today's world, 2021, that if a seller cannot do the repairs and the seller offers a monetary compensation to the buyer, that it is put in paragraph 12A. Always, always remember, anytime you're negotiating money or changing money in the contract and addenda, you always must talk to the lender first. And 99% of the time, the lender is going to say, if the seller is giving you monetary compensation for repairs, put it in paragraph 12A. So you're going to put it in here. The scenario goes, you're in your option period, you get your inspections done, 5 items need to be done, you send it over to the seller. Seller, I need you to repair the toilet. I need you to repair the shower. I need you to fix the broken window latch. The seller replies, okay, great. I'm elderly, I can't do it. I'll give you $1,000 and you'll have to take care of it. The buyer says, great, give me the $1,000, I'll take care of it after closing. You call the lender, Mr. Lender, the seller's gifting me $1,000 for credit issues. Where do you want it? He's going to say, put it in paragraph 12A. Why? The reason they do that is because they don't want a red flag to the underwriter that there's repairs needed to the home, especially if it's FHA, and also for conventional. We don't want underwriting red flagged that there's issues with the house, because the underwriter can then request the inspection report. The underwriter can then request a hold on the process. Can it bust out a loan? It could bust out a loan. If it busts out a loan, it busts out your contract. So number 4 is highly used. 5 is if you have your FHA cost of repairs. This is a case where the lender came up, there's $4,000 of repairs, and both parties agreed to split it equally. That's the most common practice for that, where they split it equally. And that's how you split something equally. $2,000 for the seller, $2,000 for the buyer. It's most common how that paragraph is used. Number 6, you need to extend your option period. The most common misperception is you can extend the option period for no money. No, you need to extend it for money. Some people put $1 in there. Is lunch here?
Yeah, and the lunch order is ready.
Okay, yeah, we're running just a little bit behind. So, okay, thank you. I'm gonna have to extend my class. And then other modifications. This is where you would change sellers' names, add a buyer, take off a buyer, add a seller, take off a seller, change their names. Totally okay to do that in here.
Is that where you correct the zip code?
Correct the zip code, correct a lot and block, and then execute. Okay, the only other thing I want to get to, and I have to go because we do have our lunch and learn, and I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to extend my class, I think. Would you guys like me to extend this so we could cover some other things? Yeah. I just want to show you one more thing that comes into play. I want you guys to really study is there's the buyer's termination of contract. And you want to make sure everything in this termination of contract, every paragraph, every sentence here refers to a paragraph in the 1 to 4 family. So one of these match a contingency that's in the 1 to 4 family. If you study this, this helps educate you in the ways of the buyer out of a contract. So this is a great a great form for you guys to memorize. Because if you know these are the 8 options, 7 options to get out of a contract, well, now you know 7 options to get out of the contract. It helps you in your negotiations. It helps you in your sales skills. And then the last one I want you guys to get really familiar with using, it's going to help you in your business, is, I talked about it in the sales meeting, is the general notice and info. Where is that? So for you guys here, it's this general information and notice to buyers and sellers. Study this document. This, if you present this in your buyer consultation and upfront with your IABS, it helps tremendously. This explains to the consumer about those issues that they always have a hard time with, or they get mad at you for. The inspections and walkthrough. Look how this explains the inspections and walkthrough and repair process to them. It explains possession to them. It explains square footage. We have so many issues with square footage. It explains the survey and the termination option period. This is such a great explanation. I read this, and this is how I use to educate the consumer. I just take these words off the page and I regurgitate and educate the consumer on what it means. So I love, I tell them, look, this is your glossary of terms. I tell them everything that's in here is going to be in the contract and addenda.
Would you advise including this in your little packet?
Yes, yes. I give them this, the insurance and the flood one, along with the IABS buyer's rep. And I guarantee you, and you can prove me wrong, if you go through these things, these disclosures with them, your transaction is going to be so smooth. It's going to be a night and day difference, I promise you, in your real estate transaction. Because they're the same things that keep coming up all the time, that make people want to terminate, that hate you, hate the other agent, negotiations go bad, cost people money. So, so for you guys in Zoom land, let me just see if you guys got any questions. I think Nazar, I helped you with your question. We do have folks coming in for lunch and learn. So if you Zoomers want to stay on, I could have them. Yes.
I have another question about clause D, the objections.
Yes.
So you said if I'm buying a residential property, then no need to put residential in that blank. So what's the best practice in this case? Should I leave it just blank? Or?
Okay, so we're on the 1 to 4 family, and we are here with objections D. So what did you want to put in there?
Yeah, because as I told you before, we were told just to put residential and then 3 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to make it easy for everybody. But
Sure.
now you're saying if I'm buying like a residential property, then doesn't make sense to put residentials as objection. So what should I use then?
Okay, I can't understand, what property are you buying?
Residential property?
Yeah, so if you're buying resident, you can leave it residential, but you don't have to. But this just says you want to make sure that all your deeds and everything, it's used for residential use. My point was, you don't have to put those words in there because you're using a residential contract and you're buying in a residential area, it's going to be residential. This is used for things outside of that box.
Okay, so if there is no objection, does it make sense to just leave it blank or put an NA?
You can just leave it blank and then still put but you want to put 3 days in here
Yeah.
because this addresses any other issues that come up, such as there's encroachments or easements. There's 2 parts to the paragraph.
Mhm.
This 3 days covers all of this stuff in here. There's encroachments, there's easements.
So I can use NA, right?
You can just put, I would just leave this blank for regular property and put 3 to 5 days in here.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so sorry, guys, I have to cut you short again. Yeah, we do have lunch here, so take break, take lunch, and we have another class coming in right behind me. For you guys on Zoom, thank you for joining me. I think I need to extend this class. What do you think?
Yes, I guess.
Okay. All right, yeah, I'm not getting it done in enough time. All right, so you find it helpful? Any feedback, just let me know. Love you guys, and I will see you soon. Have a great
Thank you,
day.
Karen.
You're welcome. Make
Thank
it a
you.
great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Man, I got through like a quarter of the contracts. Okay. Was it helpful, though? That's all that matters. Huh?
My brain's tired. And it's not.
Just keep coming.
And
Just keep coming back.
like it
That's why I
creates
said,
more
come to
ways
every
ask
Monday.
questions. Yeah.